So let's wrap up a few more things about the type tool, as well as showing you how to transform type so that it's easier to change sizes and get it exactly the size that you want it to be. So first off, I've got my type tool and I've got a font set. I'm going to type a word, so I'm just going to do it with a point and click type for this, and I don't know, school, and then hit enter to finalize that type. Now I want to move this, so I'm going to grab my move tool and click and drag it up to the corner. And then what I would really like to do is just make a copy of that word so that I can have it exactly the same size and everything. And so I'm going to do that by clicking this layer over here in the panel and dragging it down to the new layer icon. And you can see that made a copy. It says school copy. But out here on my window I can't see it, and that's because when you make a copy this way it places it right exactly where the first one was. So it's over here. I just need to grab my move tool and move it away. But as we were talking earlier about emphasis and all of that fun stuff, you really should have a focus of a dominant element, and once you have that dominant element down, things should be smaller than that. So we need to make this smaller. Now you can always change the font size by coming over to your character box and changing it here, or grabbing your type tool and changing it up here in the font size at the top of the control bar, but I'm going to do it a slightly different way. So grab your move tool, and we are on this copy layer, so we need to make sure we're on the right layer, and we're going to transform. So you can transform by going to the edit menu and choosing free transform, which is Command T. Each one of these little squares is a handle, so I can click and drag one of these squares to resize this image. Now you can see it stretching and squishing, which you might think is cool if you want a really tall skinny font, but I'm just going to tell you right now, when it comes to fonts and typography, this is kind of a no-no, that you shouldn't squish or stretch fonts, that it's one of those things people kind of subconsciously pick up on, that there's something wrong with the font. If you want a tall skinny font, it's best to go out and find a tall skinny font. So here I've made a transformation that I don't really like and I don't want to keep. So I can actually undo that by hitting Command Z. And now it's back to the way it first was. So to keep this from squashing or stretching, we need to hold down Shift to move it proportionally down. So I'm going to hold Shift and then click and drag on this corner. And then once I get it to the size I want it to be, I can hit Enter. And then I'm going to move it up here. Okay, so that's kind of step one. Let me show you another way to copy a layer, because we want to have another copy of this. And I'm going to, instead of clicking and dragging over here, I'm going to have my move tool, which is V for Victor if you don't already have it. And then if I hold down Command and Option at the same time, you'll notice your cursor turns into a little white and black arrow, and that means you're going to copy whatever layer you're on. So if you click and drag that layer, it will drag away a copy, which is kind of useful. So this one should be a slightly different size as well. I'm going to use the short key this time and hit Command T to pull up my transform, and then hold Shift to hold it proportionally, and click and drag on one of these corners to size it up just a little bit, and then push Enter to finalize. So I think you've got that down. Let's try another thing. I want to make another copy, so I'm going to hit Command Option and drag one a little ways away. And just because I'm sick of looking at this word that way, I'm going to come over to my character panel and hit the double T right here, which means I can capitalize all of those letters automatically. And if I ever want to undo that, I can just click on it to turn it off. Alright, so let's do another transform on this one. Hit Command T. There's a few more things you need to know. So right now, if I wanted to rotate this at all, if you take your mouse and hover outside of the box, it turns into a little double arrow, and that's your rotate option. And if you click and drag, it will rotate around that pivot point, which is kind of a little crosshair you can see in the middle. Now, sometimes we want to maybe rotate it so that it's perfectly vertical, and it's kind of hard to eyeball that sort of thing. So at any time when you're rotating, if you hold down Shift you'll notice that it kind of snaps in 15-degree increments, and you can move it up to a vertical. I'm going to size this down just a little bit. So I'm holding shift again. The other thing you can do while it's in this mode is you can move it. So you'll notice as soon as I move my cursor over top the actual word, it turns into my move tool. So I can click and drag that. And I want this to be about as tall as that letter L. So I'm going to hold shift and make it smaller and hit enter. Okay, let's do just a couple more. Instead of doing the Command Option copy, I'm going to show you one last one, and you can kind of pick from the 3 ways I've shown you to make it your habitual copying mode. So you can hit Command J, which is for jump, and Command J will jump a copy of that layer up. So it's the same thing as clicking and dragging down here, it's just faster. So now I have another copy. I'm going to move it away so I can see it. And I'm going to hit transform, so Command T, and hold shift to rotate it back down to horizontal, as well as transforming it bigger. So this little crosshair in the middle is called the pivot point, and we can actually change that pivot point by clicking on it and dragging it somewhere else. And when that pivot point is changed, I can rotate around wherever that pivot is. And it doesn't have to be just inside of that rectangle. I can actually move it clear out here and it'll rotate there. So I guess there's some, I have used this before. It's probably not something I really anticipate you using, but just so you know it's there. So I'm going to hit enter to finalize, and I don't want my one word slightly crooked that way, so I'm going to go undo, Command Z, and it will pop it back to the way it was when I began that transform. Alright, but we're not done yet, so I'm going to show you just a couple more things. Hit Command T to get your transform. Let's hold shift and rotate this back to horizontal, and again make it bigger and drag it out here. So there is a couple other options. If you right click, you can see we've done, the first one is scale, which we've done. We've also done rotate. The other one is skew. So when it is editable type, there's kind of a lot of limits on how you can transform this, but you can play around a little bit and see what it will let you do. So there's skew that way, and then the other one, if you right click again, is warp. And if you choose warp, it'll disappear like it's done, but it actually isn't. You've got new controls up here on the control bar, and this little button is down. That's another way you can get the warp option. But if you come over here to the drop down where it says warp, you can choose one of these, such as arc, and then these are the adjustments for it. Now you can change these adjustments by either typing in a number and hitting enter, or anytime there's a window like this, you can click and drag on the word, and then when you let go, it will update it. So it looks like going to the right increases it, going to the left decreases it. And there's plenty of fun options in there, so go ahead and play with those and see what you come up with. And I'm going to hit enter and leave that there for the moment. So I think that's pretty much everything with transform, and a couple of nifty copy tricks that you can use to quickly move words around your window and make lots of copies so that you can fill up a word cloud.